Okay, and we are live. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Before we get started, I am going to just quickly change the view so that when Chantel is speaking, you're looking at her. So thank you so much for joining us today, Chantel. It's a pleasure to have you here. For everyone who's watching, I'm sure you know who you are, but this is Chantel Brown. She is a Democratic candidate for Ohio's 11th Congressional District. And she is running to represent the district in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. And she is here with us tonight. We are the Cleveland Heights Progressives. We are a volunteer activist community in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and we are working to bring about progressive political change in our area. So that's it. How are you tonight, Chantel?
I am excited and I am grateful for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for having me this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. As progressives, we are big believers in democracy, and we absolutely believe that for voters to make good choices, they need to make informed choices. So we are all about, we are asking all the candidates pretty much the exact same questions so that voters can compare apples to apples. Okay. All right. So we're just going to get started. We're going to just dive right in. We've been talking to a lot of candidates, and every person running in this race has their own strengths, values, and experiences that shape them as a candidate and set them apart. At the end of tonight's forum, what are 3 things that you would like people to know about you?
Okay, so 3 things that I'd like people to know is that I am currently elected and have the unique experience of governing during these unprecedented and challenging times. I have 9 years of consecutive legislative experience in that area, and I am collaborative. So I am looking forward to working with the Biden-Harris administration to get things done and to get the resources into the hands of people who need it the most.
Thank you so much. So if elected, as you said, these are unprecedented times. Our nation is facing so many crises all at once, so many problems that need remedies. It can be hard to figure out where to start. If elected, what actions will you prioritize and work toward the moment you step foot in Congress?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. So my top 3 priorities have been healthcare, jobs, and justice. Healthcare, if we don't have a healthy society, then the other 2 won't matter, right? So making sure that we're distributing the vaccine equitably, and as these new variants continue to kind of pop up as it relates to COVID-19, making sure that we have free, regular, and reliable testing available. When it comes to jobs, this pandemic has put millions of people out of work. And so we want to make sure that we are putting money back in their hands, but preparing them to get back into the workforce. There are going to be a lot of displaced workers. You may hear people talk about a medical mecca, but we need to also be cognizant of those who may not have the background or the interest even in exploring the medical field. So project-based manufacturing opportunities is something that I think we need to explore. I'm excited about this $2 trillion package that the Biden-Harris administration has been talking about. When I think of jobs, I also think about our roads, railways, and bridges, and now broadband. I think it's important that your audience knows around broadband services. Right now, the pandemic amplified the need for everyone to have access to high quality Wi-Fi. And clearly the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration understands this importance and are making an investment towards broadband, which will inevitably create more job opportunities. So I'm excited about that. As I touch a little bit more on the broadband, what brought that about was the students that had to transition from in-person learning to virtual learning. And so that was what initiated my activism to set aside $2 million to make sure that they had hotspots and personal computers and laptops to make sure that they would not fall too far behind when they had to transition from in-person learning to virtual learning. But that talks about education. Education is the great equalizer when it comes to our job opportunities. And so again, making sure not only those who want to go to college can afford to go to college, but also thinking about those high school students that may want to enter the trades. That is going to be critical to restoring our jobs. And finally, the entrepreneurship. Biden-Harris administration has made some commitments around investing into small businesses, and we know that small businesses are the biggest economic drivers to jobs in our society. So making sure that they, keep that being a partner, make sure that they keep that promise to invest in entrepreneurships and small businesses and giving them the capital that they need to maybe open their doors or at the very least sustain during these unprecedented times. And finally, justice. I'm proud to say I led the charge to declare racism as a public health crisis here in Cuyahoga County. And that was not just legislation to make us feel good about ourselves. It actually included some statistical data so that we could measure where we are now to where I hope the improvements that we can make over time. It also included a clause to include the CASE, which is the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity. So when we talk about justice, we need to make sure that the citizens are involved in making suggestions to those who have been empowered to make decisions on their behalf, and putting aggressive deadlines so that these justice issues don't just fall by the wayside, because too often that's what has happened in the past. And so when drafting that legislation, I made sure that we got recommendations from that community organization before the end of the year. And so again, healthcare, jobs, and justice, things that I have had the honor and the huge responsibility of addressing in my current elected capacity, and things that I'd like to be able to do if the people of Summit County and Cuyahoga County should see fit to have me become the representative of the 11th Congressional District.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You mentioned healthcare, so we're going to talk about healthcare now. Just brace yourself. I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at you, and I'm sure you're familiar with all of them, but here we go. In 2019, the United States spent $3.8 trillion on healthcare, and this is an increase from 2018 of 4.6%, which is twice the rate of inflation. At this rate, we are on track to spend about $50 to $55 trillion on healthcare over the next decade. In 2019, this accounted for 17.7% of our GDP, which is the largest share of GDP spent on healthcare of any nation in the world. And yet, even though we're spending so much, it is estimated that around 90 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured, that about 59% of all bankruptcies in America are due to medical debt, and that each year in America, we lose between 30,000 and 70,000 lives simply because people could not afford healthcare. How can we fix this? And if elected, how will you work to make that happen?
Very loaded question. Yes. So I think, again, it's important to point out that I have had some experience and that the reason I am running is to be a partner to the Biden-Harris administration and to help Speaker Pelosi pass an agenda to help with these issues. And I think it's important to point out that no one should go without healthcare, right? I believe we must cover everyone and lower costs, and we have to do it now. That's the thing. These things can't wait. And the fact that we have a very thin majority at the Senate and the House, again, emphasizes the importance of having someone who's willing to work with the administration. I think a public option is the fastest and likeliest way that we can cover and lower costs. It builds on the success of Obamacare. But I think it's also important to note that I am on record. I would also vote for Medicare for all if it came to the House floor. I also believe that we need to lower prescription drug costs. And finally, I can't help but revisit the fact that the racial inequities in healthcare. When I talk about the legislation that I was able to pass, which I should point out was with bipartisan support. Okay, so while I am the chairwoman of the Democratic Party, I'm not so democratic that I am unable to work across the aisle. And the fact that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from childbirth and pregnancy-related causes than white women is what prompted that legislation to declare racism as a public health crisis. We have third world infant mortality rates with first-class hospitals. And so to me, that made no sense. So that work actually began in 2016 when I first got elected to county council. And the introduction of the legislation came 3 years later, after we'd done a ton of research, meeting quarterly with many of the healthcare facilities in the county, UH, Cleveland Clinic, Metro Health. The suggestion of declaring racism as a public health crisis was made in October 2019 to me. And so, we meet quarterly again. So I introduced it to my staff in January of 2020. And then the next time we would have met would have been March, but the pandemic struck. So the irony in all of that, timing is everything. The disparities from the pandemic were heightened and people were much more aware. And then the tragic killing of George Floyd happened. And so those things coupled with the data and statistics enabled me to get that legislation passed during, again, some of the most polarizing, divisive, and unprecedented times in our history. And so that type of collaboration, I think, will be is what DC needs. And I'm ready to take on DC and continue to do that great work in the area of healthcare.
Thank you so much. We're going to come back to the question of George Floyd and criminal justice. So I want you to hold on to that minute. But we're going to move on to, when we are talking about equity, we also need to talk about poverty and wealth and income inequalities in America. So right now in America, about 26 million people don't have enough to eat. On any given night, over 500,000 people are sleeping on the streets, and around 18 million people right now are behind on their rent or their mortgage and are facing homelessness. All of this was made worse by the pandemic, but it also preceded the pandemic. In a nation as wealthy as the United States, how would you work to help us achieve economic justice?
So I think we should start off giving President Biden some credit. This COVID relief bill took a step towards cutting childhood poverty rate in half. And we really need to make those provisions permanent, because in my elected capacity, too often I hear from people in Northeast Ohio who can't afford some combination of housing, healthcare, education, and childcare. And so when we're talking about these things, this care package and the COVID relief package are critical. And so again, I think we need to give credit where credit is due. I'm also proud to say in my elected capacity, I was able to support universal pre-K, which actually works towards helping people in poverty with making sure that their children have access to high quality early pre-kindergarten education. I also support free community college. We need to make significant federal investments in pathways to the middle class that don't require a 4-year degree. And I think that is something that we should be concentrating on as it relates to eliminating or reducing that economic wealth gap. I'm proud of Secretary Fudge and the work that she's doing, because I don't know if she's gotten enough credit, but she was able to increase the housing and urban development budget significantly. And because of that, I will work to make housing more affordable. And in addition to that, ending discrimination practices around housing, like redlining, and helping provide down payment assistance through refundable tax credits. So that is another way I think that we can attack the issues around poverty and the economy. And then I can't help but to circle back to the broadband. When we we talk about redlining of the houses, we have to consider the digital redlining and that the disparate impact and how challenging it was for people to be able to communicate with the outside world. It didn't just impact our students, it impacted parents and grandparents and, teledocs, job interviews, shopping, all of these different things that we use the internet for. So we have to make sure that every community is connected to high-span broadband internet access. And finally, I would fight to pass paid family and medical leave. And I think those are just a few things that we can do to tackle poverty in this nation. And I hope that the people of the 11th Congressional District would give me the honor and the privilege to not only fight, but win some of those battles on their behalf.
It is an incredibly complex problem, and it will take a myriad of tools in any congressperson's toolbox. You mentioned college and the need for affordable college, so we're going to dive into that now. Student loan debt in the United States totals around 1.7 trillion, and it grows 6 times faster than our nation's economy. Currently, we have over 43 million people carrying on average around $40,000 worth of student debt each. Ouch. With the average public university student borrowing around $30,000 for their bachelor's degree alone. Even if all student current debt was wiped out, the national issue of student debt would simply begin again. So what should the United States be doing to address this problem? And I do understand that this stuff just happened very recently on this topic. So take it from here.
So education, I think it's important to point out, education is the pathway opportunity to middle class life, right? To a middle class life. So I support, again, free community college for all. I think the work that some of these schools have been doing to help high school students graduate with their associate's degree should just be standard. Free 4-year public college for families making $125,000 is something that I would also really push if I was so fortunate to be able to represent the 11th. And some college debt cancellation for everyone. I mean, with additional relief that would go to the people who need it the most. I applaud the Biden-Harris administration's $10,000 conversation around the $10,000. But when we talk about the average, I would certainly push a little harder to get a little more. And more than half of the people, I think we should point out in this district, have not gone to college. So we need to create, again, more pathways that don't necessarily require a 4-year degree. And I think that we can do that.
Thank you. And continuing on with the topic of education, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I have 2 school age and 1 almost school age child. So a strong primary and secondary education is indisputably one of the most formidable ways to reduce poverty, crime, and a host of other social problems. And even though 72% of Americans support increasing investments in high quality childhood education, it remains one of our nation's most underfunded public goods. One of the challenges in this is confronting dominant mindsets about how we ensure we are providing every child with the education they deserve. We've tried the punitive approach with No Child Left Behind and the competitive approach with Race to the Top. As a congressperson, how would you help fulfill America's promise to our school children?
Well, I would like to scale what we're doing with Say Yes to Education here. And I think when we started pre-K, again, I want to highlight the fact that helped really expand the universal pre-K here in Cuyahoga County by doubling the number of students from 2,000 to over 4,000 students that had access to that. But with Say Yes to Education, what we focus on there is wraparound services, just not strictly for the student, but also for the family. So making sure that the parents and the guardians have are being addressed as it relates to job insecurities, food insecurities, and housing insecurities, making sure that the families are taken care of, right? Because that then gives the student the opportunity to be focused on their learning. And with that, they will have a a much better opportunity to succeed in high school. And those who successfully graduate college by virtue of the Say Yes to Cleveland program will then be able to go to college tuition free. And that is something that we should be very proud of here. We are only one of 4 cities in the country that has this program, and it's done through public-private partnerships. I think it's important that that when we can, we hold our partners, our private partners accountable, because it's only investing in the community and their future workforce, right? So we have to encourage this type of partnership to ensure the success for the people and our citizens in our communities. And we are doing just that here right now in the city of Cleveland. So I'm pretty proud of that work and would love to be able to scale that up. Here in Ohio, the way that we allocate student funds has been ruled unconstitutional. So, there's no shortage of challenges, Josie, right? But the solution is we have to also be able to put people in place that understand the importance of really tackling these issues head on, and again, working to find solutions. And Say Yes is demonstrative of the work that I have done and the work that I would like to be able to continue to do at the federal level.
Thank you. Yeah, but it is insane that it's been ruled unconstitutional 4 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an issue that's close to my heart. It's one that takes up a lot of attention from me. Yes. So we're going to just kind of shift gears a little bit back to what we pinned earlier, criminal justice. That with the trial going on for the murder of George Floyd right now. And recently the House of Representatives also passed the George Floyd and Justice Policing Act. That passed, if it's passed in the Senate and is signed into law by President Biden, it would, among other things, ban controversial police tactics and ease the way for lawsuits against officers who violate citizens' constitutional rights. If this is made law, do you think this does enough to ensure justice in our criminal justice system? And if not, what else should be done?
It's a good first step. I would proudly support the George Floyd Justice for Policing Act. And you listed some of the things that increases accountability for law enforcement, improves data collection and transparency, and also eliminates discriminatory policing practices, right? I also support the strengthening of civil rights laws and advancing comprehensive criminal justice reform, reducing gun violence, and the ending of privatization of prisons. Here in Cuyahoga County, I can say again, I have sought out options so that when people call 911, there's not just police, fire, ambulance, but there's a crisis intervention option. I think that for people who are experiencing issues around mental health or drug addiction or homelessness, we should not rely on the police to tackle those issues. And so accordingly, I will champion the Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets Act, which is officially known as CAHOOTS. And I've been working with our Public Safety and Justice Affairs Department here at Cuyahoga County to see if we could actually get that activated here. I don't think there is any shortage of services in our society. I think the challenges are streamlining and connectivity, making sure that people know how to access these social service and crisis intervention networks. And the CAHOOTS legislation would provide a pathway for that. So I'm hoping to get that done here. And if not here, if I'm so fortunate to be elected to Congress, certainly would support that on the federal level.
Thank you so much. I'm going to really shift gears now, so hopefully keep you on your toes. And this is another issue that's also very close to my heart as a mother of young children. With each passing season, we see more and more evidence that the climate crisis is not something we're trying to prevent from happening in the future, but it is actually happening now. It is here, and it's only getting worse and quickly. From extreme weather events culminating in large-scale disasters to the growing displacement of people from both outside and within the United States, to the mounting costs of reacting to and recovering from the impacts of our changing climate. We cannot continue to ignore this crisis. What should the United States be doing about it, and how, if elected, will you help make that happen?
Well, it is a loaded question, and one of the things that came up in another form is like, if we don't have a earth, then none of this will matter, right? Healthy people, jobs, or justice. So we really need to make this a priority, and we need to focus on it now. It is an urgent matter, and it falls under that category of justice when I talk about healthcare, jobs, and justice. And I couldn't say how proud I was of President Biden when he rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement on his first day. So definitely want to acknowledge that. Also, I want you to know that I do support the Green New Deal, and I'm committed to the aggressive action on climate change with net zero emissions by 2050 and a carbon-free power sector by 2035. And we can create those goals and create millions of jobs in every part of America, right? But I also have been equally excited about some of the things that I've learned in talking to people. I've had several conversations, and we start, one of the things that came up with a gentleman that I introduced myself to. I'm always on the phone, smiling and dialing. But we talked about, I don't know if you remember when the pandemic first hit and how the emissions dropped so substantially, right? Because no one was traveling. So, I think that we can do a better job with our manufacturers for increasing the MPGs for our cars, right? I think that that's something that we can work on. I think with what Obama had in place was reversed with the Trump administration around around the miles per gallon. And we certainly need to revisit those things and consider maybe taxes on larger engine cars, right? Grouping home development and office development closer together so that we have reduced our carbon footprint, our travel footprint. It was suggested to me maybe we also consider taxes on larger homes because they use more energy, and anything over maybe 3,000 square foot, which would be a large size home. But I said, well, what about how many people? I think we need to consider how many people are living in the homes, but thinking outside of the box, and definitely continuing to push for pushing for tax credits on solar panels to reduce our utility costs. And when we talk about that, Josie, it was shared with me that we could get our utility bills down from solar panels on a 35,000 square foot home to $100 a month for a 4-bedroom square foot home. And so if we can incentivize more people to do some of these things and retrofitting our heating units and lightings from incandescents and retrofitting for solar, those are some things that we should really be talking more about on the federal level and incentivizing our citizens to be more conscientious about these things. So I don't know that we talk about it enough aggressively, but those are just some things that have been brought to my attention, and I lead by learning. So when I learn, I become a better advocate and a partner for the people that put me in a position to advocate on their behalf. So I certainly want to continue to learn and be a good partner so that we can save our earth and have a healthy place to live.
Yes, the climate crisis, it presents many, many challenges, but it also presents many opportunities for democratizing energy consumption and production. If we all had solar panels, we would not be so dependent on large utilities. So there are opportunities here too that we need to look at. One of them, of course, is rebuilding our infrastructure to make it green and modern and the infrastructure of the future with that in mind. And again, I know that the Biden administration just rolled out their infrastructure plan, and it is tied closely to green infrastructure. And just in time, because America's infrastructure report card gives us a C-, which as a mother, I would be very unhappy if someone came home with a grade like that.
I have no children by design, but I have a niece who I incentivize. This is our deal, not to cut you off. Our deal is you get X amount for A's, but anything less than an A deducts from your get for an A. So yes, C's get no love in our family, right? Okay, so
I remember my grandfather telling me, C, that's average. No. So despite the fact that a whopping 80% of Americans support rebuilding our nation's crumbling infrastructure and that these investments have a high economic multiplier, our legislators continue to balk at spending public money on rebuilding our nation's infrastructure. Here in the Cleveland East Side area, many cities are facing big bills coming due as our water and sewer infrastructure is being cited for not being EPA compliant and is failing in multiple ways. What can be done, both in the short and the long term, to address this pressing emergency?
Well, I support America upgrading our infrastructure with the investment in roads and airports and water infrastructure and connecting every community in Ohio again to high-speed broadband internet. We have to get that done. And I'm excited again because Secretary Fudge has set aside some funds so that we can address that issue. But I think in Northeast Ohio, we've continued to keep up with the increases, and we struggled to keep up with the increases in our water rates. And as utility companies and municipalities have sought to bring our gated infrastructure into compliance with the Clean Water Act standards, they've passed these costs on to our customers. And so I'm committed to continuing now Secretary Fudge's initiative to lower water bills through the Lower Income Sewer and Water Assistance Program Act, also known as LISWAP. So, so I would continue to push for that. And again, look, with the struggles and the issues that people are having during this pandemic, that to me just seems like a no-brainer and the only way to go.
Wonderful. So let's move on to one of the things that, in my opinion, has been an obstacle to getting stuff done in Congress, and that is big moneyed interests. And so we're going to talk about campaign finance reform. We see like voter turnout rates have been low for a long time. And so many Americans do not feel represented by their elected officials. And this is reflected in a poll in which 84% of respondents said that money has too much influence in our politics. The group Move to Amend wants to override the unpopular Supreme Court Citizens United ruling with the 28th Amendment that would establish in our Constitution that corporations are not people and that money is not speech. According to another poll, a majority of voters, 78%, agree and believe that we need sweeping new laws to reduce the influence of money in our politics. What do you think should be done to restore Americans' confidence in our representative democracy and to ensure that people's needs and policy preferences are addressed in our nation's halls of power?
Listen, I support initiatives to get money out of politics and overturning Citizens United and banning members of Congress from becoming lobbyists, right? In Congress, the people of the 11th can count on me to champion the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is in the Senate now, which will expand the voting rights and limit gerrymandering, as we are very gerrymandered in this district, and create new ethics rules and reduce the role of money in politics. The amount of time spent trying to be competitive, I think could be better utilized. So yes, I would not be opposed to it. Thank you for the question.
Fundraising is not fun. So we're going to shift again. I know this is going back and forth. When I organized the questions in my mind, the order made sense, and now they don't. But
answering them too. You know what I mean? So it's okay. Josie.
So we're going to shift now to immigration. And in America, as the last 5 years made very clear that there are many different viewpoints in America on immigration that bring up many different questions, such as who deserves to be here and what is the right way to come and what should happen if someone doesn't come to America in the quote unquote right way. Trump's inhumane and downright racist immigration policies cast a harsh spotlight on what is done in America's name, but they also made visible decades of our nation's complex relationship with immigration. How do you think that America should move forward on this issue?
Well, the reality is we are a nation of immigrants, and I think the first thing America needs to do on this issue of immigration is stop denigrating immigrants, right? Trump's treatment of immigrants was totally inhumane with kids in cages, and his policies were racist, divisive, and just unacceptable, right? It was a shame on our country. And so we need to be able to bring people out of the shadows. And so I support a pathway to citizenship for immigrants here. And I believe citizenship comes with rights and responsibilities. And so with that, I would simply say I would support the DREAM Act.
All right. And now looking at a larger global picture, and we're going to talk about military and our presence abroad and our military budget. In 2021, in the 2021 fiscal budget, the Defense Department comprises about 43% of the total discretionary budget. In 2019, the U.S. spent on national defense more on national defense than the next 10 countries combined. This is happening at a time when we have millions of Americans struggling to get by, when our infrastructure is crumbling, when we have a climate crisis that needs a massive mobilization. So polls consistently show that a majority of voters support cutting the defense budget to pay for domestic needs. With all of this in mind, if elected, would you support a reassessment of America's priorities that would include a sizable reduction in our military spending and presence abroad?
Easy. Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay, that was fast.
Yes.
All right. So we've gone the big global questions, and now we're going to get very, very personal. We're going to talk about reproductive rights and having babies. So a woman's ability to exercise full autonomy over her life is inextricably tied to her authority over if and when to have a child. Do you support a woman's right to assert full authority over her body and reproductive choices, or do you believe that there should be limits on a woman's right to an abortion and to obtain effective, affordable birth control? And with your position on this in mind, what actions should the federal government be taking on the issue of women's rights and reproductive freedom?
So I am 100% pro-choice. I believe that healthcare decisions should be left up to women and their doctors, not the government. And finally, I believe the right to choose, which is Roe versus Wade decision, should be codified into law so that it is never at risk of being overturned by the Supreme Court.
Thank you. And today, this is on this Trans Day of Visibility. We're going to ask this question, and President Biden put out a statement today honoring trans lives. And in early February, he issued a memorandum aimed at expanding protection of the rights of LGBTQIA people worldwide. After 4 years of Trump weakening hard-won protections for LGBTQIA people here in the United States and around the world, how can the US government act to solidify full protection and equality for LGBTQIA people?
Well, this is another piece of legislation that we passed here at the the county to ensure that the LGBTQ plus community has a pathway to legally address their civil rights when their rights are being violated. And many of them have no pathway for that right now. And so here in Cuyahoga County, we took steps to protect the LGBTQ plus community around job discrimination, housing discrimination, and issues around those issues. And so I would continue to champion those that legislation that we passed here in Cuyahoga County on the federal level. So I would be in full support of the Biden-Harris administration on these initiatives.
Thank you. And recently, this topic has been gaining more and more momentum. I'm from Colorado, so it's old hat for me. But according to a recent poll, the number of Americans who favor legalizing marijuana is at an all-time high. That pun is intended. 68%. With the understanding that the widespread use of marijuana has made enforcement of its prohibition increasingly challenging, some states have already legalized marijuana so as to shift to regulation and taxation. This has the added benefit of decreasing the harm done to people convicted of marijuana-related activities, which disproportionately impacts people of color, particularly Black Americans. However, the state-by-state solution, which New York just joined this trend, it is proving to be problematic due to how easy it is to transport marijuana without detection. With this context in mind, what do you think about legalizing marijuana at the federal level?
Yeah, it's a yes for me. I support the legalization of marijuana and removing it from the list of Schedule I substances. I also support the efforts to legalize vaping for cannabis-related businesses and their workers. And I think that we should support research into tax incentive for cannabis-related businesses and communities and populations that have been most impacted by it. So as you point out, the African American and the Black community. And finally, something along those lines, I support the efforts to expunge records of those who have been convicted of nonviolent cannabis-related offenses. So yes, 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 and yes.
Thank you. And this is kind of just a little last random question before we do our final closing question, but the ranked choice voting, it's been gaining in popularity in recent years. Some people know about it, some people don't. But proponents argue that it offers a pathway out of the dominance of a two-party system that excludes different perspectives from our nation's political dialogue and has become increasingly paralyzed by partisan gridlock. The ranked choice voting, its adoption in both municipalities and states for different kinds of elections is picking up steam. What are your thoughts on it and its usefulness as a tool to help increase representation, expand dialogue, and ease gridlock on the national level?
Oh goodness, I'm a supporter. I think that we certainly could. We certainly stand to benefit from that, and so as you indicated, its popularity is growing, and I have no qualms about implementing this and utilizing it to get more of our constituents' input as it relates to our representation. That's what we've been entrusted to do, is to represent on their behalf.
Thank you. We're zooming through this. So we are now at our final question where, and this is your chance to really wrap up everything that you brought to us today. So every candidate brings with them their own distinct combination of experience, not just political experience, but also personal, professional, and community experience. What do you think your unique tapestry of experience best, why do you think, your unique tapestry of experience best positions you to get stuff done in DC that will noticeably benefit the people of Ohio's 11th congressional district and the United States as a whole?
So I think I'll close with how I would usually start, and that's how I got into this crazy world of politics, right? not your average politician or elected official. I found myself in this world because I was the youngest homeowner on my street, surrounded by seniors and retirees who treated me like their very own. So there was a kinship and affinity there. And what led me to my first city council meeting is it was a public safety issue, quite frankly. I wanted to know where we would go in the event of an emergency. And I think that that was unique about me because I wasn't going there to complain about something that had already happened. I was forward thinking, a visionary, looking to find a solution to a problem that could potentially occur. And because of that type of proactive activism, if you will, that also garnered the attention of the administration at the time. And I also noticed that the representative from my ward, I thought, there's something that we could be doing a little better here. And so rather than complain, I decided to be the change I wanted to see. And that's what led me to run. And as I was running, the administration was kind enough to say to me, if you need some help out there, let us know. Well, as you can imagine, Josie, when you're knocking on doors and letting people know that you want to represent them, they will put you to the test. So they were quick to point out issues that had gone unaddressed for years, tree branches, sewers that hadn't been cleaned, and things like that. And so I took the administration at their word, and things started happening because as I was pointing them out, they went to fix them. So now I'm excited because I'm getting things done in my community and I'm not even elected, right? So fast forward, election day comes, the polls close, and I was down by 6 votes. So this is the story too of how important every vote is, right? But I've never been shy about my faith. As a child of faith, I said, okay, I trust God's infinite wisdom. This must not be for me. And I was convinced that I would never run for public office again because I'm getting the work done. I'm like, I don't need the title, I'm getting the work done. But little did I know, there were 23 provisional ballots in my race. And 11 days later, I learned that I had won by 7 votes. And right, so this is a testament again of how important every vote counts. Every vote really does count. And so that 7 has been significant for me because as a believer, 7 represents perfection, completion, and God. So I say that I am here by his divine intervention, grace, mercy, and favor. And it really has been the guiding force and moral compass in this work that I do called public service. And I say public service very intentionally because I realize that I work for the people. And I share that story at least once a day. And that has really kept me grounded and focused on the work and not myself, but really highlighting the importance of how important it is to us to put people before politics. And so that's why I wanted to share that story. I'm a person that is committed to putting people before politics. I am committed to working for people. When they say all politics is local, I am as local as it gets. I have earned the support of over 100 elected officials in my 9 consecutive years of legislation. I've earned that confidence because I'm a problem solver. I seek out solutions and I build consensus. And that is what's desperately needed right now in DC. I want to go to be a partner to the Biden-Harris administration to make sure people are getting the resources that they so desperately need during this pandemic. And if we think it's going to be over by the end of the year, I applaud your optimism, but the ramifications are going to be long lasting. So we need people who have experience with finding solution during these unprecedented, challenging, divisive, and polarizing times. And I have that experience. So I want to go to DC to work for the people of the 11th Congressional District. I want to go to help fulfill the legacy of those that have come before me. And that is my goal. So I will close with that. The election, the last day to vote, is August 3rd. As the chairwoman, I'm always encouraging people to vote early, and early vote starts July 7th. 7-7, there's my lucky number again. So I would encourage people to make sure you're registered to vote. If you have up till July 6th to register, then again, early voting starts July 7th, and the last day to cast your ballot would be in person at your local polling location on August 3rd. So that's my closing statements and remarks. And I just thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to share my policy, my platforms, my ideologies, and for this really engaging and hopefully what others I hope they found to be a fruitful and productive conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Everyone, this has been Shontel Brown. She is a Democratic candidate running for to represent us in Congress for the Ohio's 11th Congressional District. So thank you for joining us, Chantel, and thank you for everyone who is watching wherever it is that you're watching. Have a wonderful evening.